my energy. Otherwise, I will just get these secondary effects from the emotional responses that my own body generates from the shit that people try to pull, and they get a reaction out of me. Okay, this happens often because I had this thing, especially with host. Cannot lie. My host doesn't lie. It is just something that happens. And when it comes to me, I am in love with gremlin posting. I gremlin post a lot because I'm not going to give people the benefit of actually knowing when something upsets me or something doesn't. Because honestly, who is anybody to deserve that from me? No one. When I post the evidence, when I post proof of people doing something, that is the consequence of people misusing their time on the internet and tapping with those little fingers of theirs and using them to try to pick on others, belittle them, talk down to them, undermine their experiences, and think they're just entitled to doing that without repercussions and consequences. People don't like that. They don't like that I'm not a doormat. They don't like that I'm not going to be palatable for their online existences. And they don't like that I don't put up with bullshit no matter how much they try. I speak the truth. And if people don't like it, then they can deal with it. I don't answer to the judgment of people who orchestrate through AMONs for harassment campaigns documented to the moon and back. They utilize and regurgitate omission as a technique in order to not hold themselves accountable for anything. They lie constantly, and they reroute things to minors because they want to disseminate the false information to minors, and then when they get called out for that, they will deflect it again. They stalk minors like we saw with Great Candy stalking the 13-fucking-year-old, which is something that they did with full evidence of it. It's already provided. And when their follower, their grooming adult follower, got exposed for that, for looking at upload that 13-year-old show was private, so there was no real way for anybody to even know that blog existed unless they really looked into it. Then Grey Candy tried to turn it around and then tried to blame the fact that the 13-year-old was posting that, while Grey Candy had two minors that knew them pretty damn well, follow them a lot, having an SW logs. And if people actually care about the minors at hand, they will report the blog. But because they're drama leeches and they're hypocritical, childish pieces of shit, instead I just wanted to use the 30-year-old for the drama. These are just things that happened. Of course, along with everything else we have documented from the Ray Candy and Company. We can list many more examples. The documents aren't going anywhere. Just for instance, if you did read the report of the summer situation, you didn't just read the English one, but you read the Spanish one, which is different, calling out a crash for near Frog and Company, in which they said, well, you see, we talked to lawyers and this would actually not make it a case in court. See, Choco is a chronic liar, is a known liar because this and that, and then, in fact, what they haven't said about them is a lie. But they will try to do anything to move goalposts because they love to move goalposts, and they have been caught lying so many times they cannot do a single thing. For instance, Frog and Company will just try to move that back to March. Well, forward message first, and we had a conversation about their blog being cool and the cosmic audience situation and this and that. And then I called them an enabler because I saw that people were getting hurt and they were using it for enjoyment, for drama, without actually taking things seriously on both sides. So I respectfully said that I found their behavior enabling and I blocked them. Next time actually talk to Proshifrogo, or just a little Goli account. It was a normal conversation. Of course, this was already after Frogo and I had our first conversation with the whole king thing. And they said, oh, well, I'm not comfortable with that. And I'm like, okay, cool. Because, boundaries, which is something none of them understand, right? And had a conversation. They let me follow them, talk to them in DMs. I asked them verbatim if they wanted me to unfollow them, or if I could still. They said, no, you're good, you can follow. And then the next time, it was well onto the whole summer situation. What Frodo would like to do, and what others would like to do, is try to intertwine the first conversation with them in March, and then catapult it to the summer situation in order to initiate a false beginning that doesn't exist. Because these are two separate situations, and neither correlates to each other. The thing with Proshifrogo, in which they had told me the name of their main account, and they were told, don't worry, like, I don't want to hurt you or anything. If I had wanted to leak your account, I already would have. They took that as a threat. Remember, they didn't say it, but they took that as a threat. But later on the summer situation, when I had told them that this threat, because it was plain evident for all to see, about the Policía Local, and that was a threat. And they said, oh, so now it's subtext, but when people, and now it's contextually, but when people say this or that, you say this or that or another. So they're hypocritical, and they constantly play rules for the, but not for me. But the fact of the matter is the summer situation itself started with Silver. Because another thing that no one really told the people involved in that situation, Silver came into my own blog first, before any of the whole thing in DMs. Silver had actually sent me shit in my blog, neurotypical related, and trying to argue about neurotypical shit. Told them I don't consider BPD to be related to neurotypicals. They started on my comment section, put a weird ass guilt trip. I wasn't comfortable with them. I blocked them. They suicide rated on their blog. Again, suicide rated on the blog. I went in DMs, let them talk about whatever this was making them upset. Help them out. Because I also had openly defended them on their blog when they were getting picked on. Then there was the conversation in DMs a bit later on with the whole dynamic and the little thing. Then they had consented verbally to the conversation. It's quite literally in the document. If people don't want to look at it, that's not my problem, but it's right in the document. So I do not care what anyone says. They tried it. Because again, I remember everything that happened. And they tried to repurpose their verbatim consent to conversation in which they had power over someone as making their discomfort the start of a campaign. Transmitting the DMs with Frogo, and then using the Magic Wand picture as a blackmail tool. When Frogo had accused someone, myself, of forced sexual conversion, which obviously didn't happen. They claim it was a typo 2 months later, and then it was conversation, not conversion. as if that had any legal bearings. This was, of course, after the whole thing with patronizing, in which patronizing and cemetery dog had sent for the ash on their inbox. And then we have the whole document going on, when patronizing was also saying, crying about religion will make you molest them. Also as an NSW blog, 18 plus, responding and directly interacting with a 15-year-old follower. And the Starpies were defending them at first. Then there was the back and forth document after I had already DM'd Frogo, because I had already DM'd them. And around the middle of the Zalgo text, I also told them if they had something to say or to clarify, they could tell me directly. This was before I had sent them any of the asks as that account, because they weren't anon, these asks were on the accounts. Because they had started on a false defamatory statement for sexual conversion. In the middle of a crisis of 3 people sexually harassing me at once and disseminated the misinformation to their following. As a cis kid, by the way. And then they live documented their reactions to that campaign that they launched. Near's mistakes and Near's proven chronic pathological lying were also documented. Number 1, saying that this is the objective through blah 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 blah. Not objective, as we already said. 2, saying it was for someone who wasn't biased. Second lie, they were best friends with Frogo. Number 3, saying that all screenshots were being shown and they weren't cropped unless it was for readability purposes. No, the screenshots were cropped conveniently to push the narrative, and it's also shown because in many of the receipts, those screenshots get cropped right before what is actually the full image would expose them. And I also know because Ace had, which is one of the document writers of the summer situation, had told me that both Frogo and Niad had been asking everybody to try and get information from the blog and to try and put things into the document, and they also had spent every single day stalking and making fun of me. So that was also a thing that occurred. Another thing that they lied about, and we can also see that from my blog because it's also there, is the Choco posting this to the minor followers how to bypass this thing and that thing, because the blog itself had videos that got falsely labeled as mature, because there was a glitch that lasted a month in which all videos got flagged. Tumblrs get many glitches. And these were bigger responses from people who wanted to know about this situation. Because Frogo had disseminated the sexual misinformation to their minor audience. And people wanted to know what had actually happened. Nier and company, however, were not interested in knowing. They were interested in framing. And of course, telling people what actually happened got repurposed by them as something to do. They couldn't repurpose it because then I showed the full images and that rebunked them on itself. He also went into quote Penal Code 184, which is about sexual harassment regarding labor work, which has nothing to do with anything in summer Boy! And then, when they got called out for what they were doing, their only defense was deflections. It's like they genuinely believe that the people who have eyes and can actually read what's on the screen are not capable of doing it. They believe that their own word supersedes what's seen on the screen. Here is an ignoramus. So I have already said, and will continue to say, this summer document was a forge. Self-incriminating one. You cannot plaster a sexual image of someone's sex toy onto the public. And you cannot do that under any guise, no matter what you want it to be. So a fully consensual conversation. It was a person with power, or another one, had consented to their interaction. Putting that magic wand onto that document was a form of blackmail, as well as a form of coercion. They claim that if the magic wand was blurred, then it made it legal, is incorrect. The blurring is not what makes something legal or illegal. And again, most of these individuals do not know the law, but they pretend that they do. And they're saying that Near lied about, even though this is not related to the document, but it's also fairly interesting. Grasshoppers. Thinking that they're not animals. It's something that he said on his blog before. Even though grasshoppers quite literally are animals. But again, there's something called common knowledge. We'll go back to the document. Near saying, Choco wanting or looking for NSFW, blah, 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 in front of their minor, following on a screenshot that Burberry stated the opposite, that anyone who liked to post with a micro level on would be blocked, which is the exact opposite. That's what Near said. Another one talking about how I allegedly believe in narc abuse. So it's just nothing, an anecdote, because someone has said it apparently they're serious enough. They think if someone says something, that mustn't make it true. It's not like evidence is a thing. Of course there wasn't, because I never did. Another thing to their document that Near had lied about, obviously, was they got complex posts. First, because Near has a god complex himself, so his projection of that is really ironic. Secondly, because she had purposely cropped the full post in which it was indicated that this was in correspondence to patronizing. Patronizing has said that's because of their trauma, because of their experiences, that they didn't owe anybody anything, and since people suffered, since they suffered, then people should suffer as well. And also, because they all exhibited their God complex. I said, then okay, then that means I can do the same to you now. And I made a post that was a gimmick. A chain of command that was a gimmick. Near, of course, tried to decontextualize it in order to push his false narrative. Because showing the full post would have actually told it with the proper context. But of course, Near, as already said, is a liar, so he couldn't show that. The next were just the standard responses to the result of a false sexual conversion accusation being propagated and distributed to a large following. the other thing was trouble, like in the autistic little doggy county of the minor illnesses. Nia had said that the account was necessary for documentation, but if it had been necessary for documentation, it would have been exposed to the public with a minor following. It would simply been added the messages into a document. The messages, by the way, were not even sexual. So that's another bullshit lie that Nia had made. Because accepting accountability is too much for chronic liars like him. Another lie was that the people at hand had not caused distress, had not caused prolonged distress. And then Nia had used words, looked them up into the dictionary in order to be coy, in order to stay. The key word here is this, the key word here is that something happening once or twice is not this and that. So meaning that the distress wasn't prolonged because it had happened once or twice. As if neither was anybody who got to say how long something did or didn't happen. Or as if it wasn't their entire group against one person. Meanwhile, any time they got a response, they got to label it as quote-unquote cyberbullying or harassment. Them going against one person altogether is suddenly not cyberbullying, but the person in question retaliated against all of them and holding them accountable is suddenly cyberbullying. Again, this is a whole dynamic that's easy to find as a cult. Because no person in the right mind, no person with any amount of mental agility, no person that understands what they're actually doing and saying how it affects people will conduct themselves in such a manner and expect not to be held accountable. And at the end of that document, by the way, now months later, we've seen it having the audacity to say, see, using Ben posts from me and using posts from the group chat that we had is fact. Yes, someone with BPD, you should know that what is not can control their actions on an episode. Well, that's incredibly rich, isn't it? For 3 reasons. Reason number 1, I wasn't just having an episode myself, I was having a crisis of summer spanning across false accusations and a gigantic bombast false allegation based on a conversation in which there had been consent and a false type of by another person. In which, by the way, minors got involved. And when information was asked about it, it wasn't provided because they were enjoying what they were doing. Number 2, people milked those reactions for local material all over Discord servers, which was also something that happened daily, and something that people who were part of those campaigns spoke about, because they were also part of that server before, and some people had already told me themselves. Which is why I don't let them lie about that part either. Number 3, who do you think you are to use somebody's reactions to your campaign, lie about those reactions, lie about the context, group and put pieces of the puzzle together for them to fit wrong but still paint a false narrative, using events as moral indictments while you yourself had so many events on your blog. And then you had the nerve to say that you have BPD and you're not in control of your actions on the BPD episode. So you are not in control of your actions, but the person exposing you has to be in control of their actions on the BPD episode with regards to something that all of you had fabricated. Of course not. But again, this is just some of the many lies that they have propagated. Frodo told this, of course. And their only defense and their only reflection was, well, what makes you think that we haven't corrected the thing with the penal code here and that? As if, one, I had to believe them with that, considering that they had no idea about it until I brought it up myself. Two, as if that would somehow make it anything but trying to destroy evidence. Otherwise, they would have publicly apologized for their defamatory statements, and as we all know, they don't do that because they haven't got complex. And they believe themselves that everybody should kill before them and accept their abuse no matter what. And also three, when you go to court, you need to provide evidence of the entire document. It's not necessary. It's not enough to just download a PDF. You also have to show the whole history and the whole editing of the document, because anybody can edit a document. They claim that they had gone to a lawyer, and they claim that there's no case to be fought. But again, one, that shows that I would have to believe them, and I don't care to. Two, that shows that we're talking exclusively about the legalese, and we're not talking about what they actually did. Because they have said on the blog before many times that law and morality are not the same thing. However, when they don't have any morality to speak about because they committed certain acts, they will roll back and then they will try to bring up the law that they themselves don't understand because they don't know anything about the law, and then try to use it as an excuse. When using certain definitions, they change the different context of things in order to fit those definitions of the words that they're using while stripping the context away from things. This is something they have done from start to finish. They're parasocial because they are entirely obsessed with one person. They're obsessed with one person's boundaries, and they're obsessed with trying to have power over that person. And because that person doesn't let them, that they exist exclusively around stalking the person in question. They think that somehow what we document and what we live is going to be washed away. Which is why they always try to find a vulnerability point. They always try to find something new that validates what they did or that excuses them. They always try to find a new goalpost to move or a new excuse to make. Which is again more part of the core behavior. They have posted themselves on their own blog. So there without even a mature label. That is little toy. They have posted about that is little toy on their blog. And about the irony of the name. It's for the minor audience, by the way, without a label. But that wasn't indicted because, it's Frodo, and clearly Frodo can do whatever they want, right? Great Candy as well. Great Candy, their current blog right now is supposed to be only about adults, but their previous blog, Great Candy Rants, and Great Candy was open to everybody, and a lot of minors had interacted with their posts, with their NSFW accounts on their blog being publicly available. Much like with Great Candy disseminated DMs with another individual about what I quote-unquote get off to, as if that was any of the business of somebody who has a scat material on their blogs and who has the fucking fetishes that they have. Again, and they try to frame that under unhealthy and dangerous, but they had on their blog posted about how they're lost, that they're a canvas, and that they're lost, and that they're just there for everybody to use in front of their minor following, and asking for an unhinged meal and not needing to be manipulative. Like this, we can put many examples. Bloop, for example. Bloop, had sent me a fucking ask, sorry, said, as Honeybird. Their fucking blog had asked about short shit on my blog. I had deleted it, I had contacted. Because they wanted to talk about that, I was certain they wanted to drag it to the house. But they themselves had set the sexual message first. With the Great Candy documents, the screenshot about quote-unquote encouraging God to Chroma. Chroma, the same Chroma, the same star crest that Yol and the entire half of community had been beefing with, including thousands, all the 30-year-olds. And you're not embarrassed with yourselves. With all the shit you did, and you still think that you get to pretend to care about the minor in question. Same with Caleb, but with Caleb is even worse. With the other parts of the document, the whole Mirmo situation, claiming and trying to argue whether something is or isn't rape imagery. Whether he said it was recoded, I said specifically why it was recoded imagery. And in your infinite brilliance, read ignorance. You thought that you got to argue with what was something that wasn't, when the intent behind it was what it was and was documented about. If you grow something of a religious nature, or the interest of the cis kid holding a cross, knowing they have religious trauma, knowing that Mirmo is the face of their blog, and knowing that they had a crisis over that very thing. You're not being harmless, you're not trolling, you're not quote-unquote poking fun or quote-unquote retaliation because you started, first of all. Secondary, you're sexually harassing somebody. And you're using that picture as a medium to do it. Someone who tries to argue definitions and tries to misconstrue them is somebody who doesn't want to deal with the fact that they know they did something and they know why they did it. Just like the many troll accounts that had sent religious imagery and that had also said, oh, Jesus loves you very much with the Mirmo thing. It's called Course of Conduct. It has happened for over 8 months in which people did the things that they did. This is documented to the moon and back. And Fergo's lawyer saying, well, this wouldn't make it to court. 1, do I look like I care about what you say? 2, it is incredibly bold and presumptuous of them to think I haven't contacted lawyers myself, but I haven't contacted people who know about the law more than anybody involved. Fergo's claim to fame with this whole thing is that I hadn't actually issued legal action back in summer. But Fergo, and as I said, Ace had said, Fergo was bullshitting with it themselves because they are poor, allegedly, and they don't have money. And when they got put in contact with a Spanish person, they didn't do anything. So, stones from glass houses is what the entire cult is known for. And I could go on and on and on. I'm going to actually review this here. This document exists to underscore a pattern of conduct and criminal intent of offenders and perpetrators of the campaign, harassment campaign against Choco. With the past document serving as precedent, the juridical penitence and the crimes will be published at the end of the project. Warning, this document is not suitable for minors. It is recommended to proceed with caution. At the end of the 5th tab, the document will have brought up the following. Sexual harassment, child sexual abuse, grooming, denial, attack, reverse victim offender, gaslighting, manipulation tactics, emotional manipulation, cold structure, sexual predation with aggravating factors, evidence of fabricating evidence, social engineering. Who is Nier? Nier is a 23-year-old adult. Has diagnosed narcissist personality disorder, even though he's suspect that he's also antisocial. He was the first guilty person using Choco as a project back in the summer campaign and the sexual harassment campaign. Like Choco lived this summer. Nier is proponent to pathologizing people. In his echo chamber, his circular reasoning is reinforced. He has a tendency to manipulate everybody in order to gain his goals, which is reinforced in his social circle on a routinary basis. Nier's conduct is also perfectly aligned with the average childhood of an antisocial profile. The permanent boredom, lack of interest, and the quid pro quo as a lifestyle. Nier concludes that he never hurt an animal. However, he admits that he pulled the wings and legs of grasshoppers. Both things are contradictory with the statement of not hurting anybody. This is evidence of either one of two. Either Nier doesn't consider animals grasshoppers, but due to their size, or Nier is lying. That also means that his fences were exclusively built in order to be part of the crowd, which also fits with his disorder. Throughout history, humanity has adopted lots of animals as pets. The belief that only cats and dogs are important already underscore the draft in which a lot of the problems regarding conduct of Nier would soon follow. The way in this he responds to his own questions, and the answer is whatever favors him the most. He applies that to the outside world. There's problems when another person follows a different life model than he does. Or simply doesn't have a model because humanity and the human brain is a complex one. Treating people like puzzles, like chess pieces, is a clear lack of emotional intelligence, and a rather severe one at that. The other means that he bonded with other individuals due to benefit, due to whatever benefited him. Emotionally manipulating someone else and emotionally manipulating the other person and the other students back in school, and also pretending to be friends with him. Aside from cruel and sadistic, Nier admits he doesn't feel remorse, using his disorder as an excuse. He understands and he admits that he is used to not feeling bad about the consequences of his actions. I became less horrible, incorrect. Nier's behavior has been reinforced throughout 23 years of his life. His childhood was a prelude of a sexual predator. Nier can request not to be judged by his childhood all he wants. His actions are what deserve being judged. Childhood is an excuse, just as the disorder. Now sexual harassment and the wrongful terminology and the wrongful legal terminology. Nier tries to define sexual harassment under different legal frameworks, which is punishable under perjury. Nier cannot falsify evidence or change the context of laws according to his convenience, and it all had consented, textually speaking, to receive a picture, which automatically voids the legal excuse that Nier had. Distributing the sexual object of a victim without consent and disseminating said private material when the victim is vulnerable is not discomfort. Those are aggravating factors of sexual harassment. The criminal mind, or mens rea, has been established throughout summer, where it was utilized as a coercion tool, distribution, and sexualization of the victim throughout a certain period of time. And I quote, Don Juan Carlos I, King of Spain, to all of us presented, know that the Spanish General Court has passed, and I come to sanction the following organic law. In accordance to the 18th article, point 1 of the Spanish Constitution, the right to the honor and the privacy, intimate and familiar to the proper image have the rank of fundamental, and to that point realized to the constitutional text of the 20th article, point 4. The citizen has the rights of all and constitutes a limit of exercising said liberties of expression. The same receptors recognizes and protects with the same character and fundamentals. And I'm actually going to read all of this in Spanish, and I don't care if someone doesn't understand it. El desarrollo mediante la correspondiente ley orgánica a tenor del artículo 81 de la Constitución del Principio General de Garantía de tales derechos mantenidos en el citado artículo 18.1 de la misma constituye la finalidad de la presente ley. Establece el artículo 1 de la misma la protección civil de los derechos fundamentales al honor, a la intimidad personal y familiar y a la propia imagen frente a todo género de injerencia o intromisiones ilegítimas, pero no puede ignorar que algunos de esos derechos gozan o provisionalmente gozarán de una protección penal. Así ocurre en el derecho al honor amparado por las prescripciones contenidas en el libro 2, título 10 del vigente Código Penal, y con determinados aspectos del derecho a la intimidad personal y familiar que son objeto de una protección de sus naturalezas en el proyecto de nuevo Código Penal, recientemente aprobado por el Consejo de Ministros. Por ello, en el caso de que exista protección penal, tendrá esta preferente aplicación por sin duda la más fuerte efectividad. Si bien la responsabilidad civil derivada del delito se deberá fijar de acuerdo con los criterios que esta ley establece. Los derechos garantizados de la ley han sido encuadrados por la doctrina jurídica más autorizada entre los derechos de la persona, la calificación de la que obviamente se dependerá del carácter de irrenunciable enunciabilidad referida. Este carácter genérico a la protección civil que la ley establece. En el artículo 2 se regula el ámbito de protección de los derechos a que se refiere, además de la delimitación que pueda resultar de las leyes. Se estima razonable admitir que lo previsto por ellas se esfera del honor, de la intimidad personal y familiar. Y el uso de la imagen esté determinada de manera decisiva por las ideas que prevalezcan en cada momento en la sociedad y por el propio concepto de cada persona, según el que los propios mantenga el respeto y determine sus pautas de comportamiento. De esta forma, la cuestión se resuelve en la ley en términos que permiten al juzgador la prudente determinación de la esfera de protección en función de datos variables según los tiempos y las personas. Los derechos protegidos en la ley no pueden considerarse absolutamente limitados. En primer lugar, los imperativos de interés público pueden hacer que, por ley, se autoricen expresamente determinadas entradas en el ámbito de la intimidad que no podrán ser reputadas legítimas. De otro lado, tampoco tendrá este carácter los consentidos por el propio interesado, posibilidad esta que no se opone a la irreconocibilidad abstracta de dichos derechos. Pues ese consentimiento no implica la absoluta abdicación de los mismos, sino tan solo el parcial desprendimiento de alguno de los facilitadores que los integran. Ahora bien, la ley exige que el consentimiento sea expreso. Y la índole particular de estos derechos permite que pueda ser revocado en cualquier momento, aunque con indemnización de los perjuicios de la revocación siguiente el destinatario mismo. y otorgamiento del consentimiento cuando se trate de menores o incapacitados en objeto de las prescripciones contenidas en el artículo 3º. Los artículos 4 al 6 de la ley se contempla el supuesto del fallecimiento del titular de derecho lesionado. Las consecuencias del mismo en orden a la protección de estos derechos se determinan según el momento en que la lesión se produjo. Aunque la muerte del sujeto del derecho extingue los derechos de la personalidad, la memoria de aquel constituye una prolongación de esta última queda también sustituida por el derecho. Por eso se atribuye la protección en el caso de que la lesión se haya producido después del fallecimiento de una persona o que ésta hubiera desigualado en su testamento. El efecto de ella a los parientes supervivientes y en último término al ministro fiscal, con la limitación temporal que se ha estimado prudente. En el caso de que la lesión tenga lugar antes del fallecimiento de que el titular del derecho lesionado ejerciera las acciones reconocidas en la ley, solo subsistirán estas si no hubieran podido ser ejercitadas por aquel o por su representante legal, pues si se pudo ejercitarlas si no se han existido una fundada presunción de que los actos que lógicamente pudieran constituir lesiones no merecieran esa consideración a lo solo de perjudicar a un representante legal. En cambio, la acción ya entablada sí será transmisible, porque en este caso existe una expectativa de derecho a la indemnización. La definición de las intromisiones de urgencias ilegítimas en la policía se llama con los artículos 7 y 8 de la ley. Primero de ellos recoge en términos de razonable amplitud diversas respuestas supuestas intromisión o injerencia que pueden darse en la vida real y coinciden con los previstos en las legislaciones protectoras existentes en otros países de desarrollo social y tecnológico igual o superior al nuestro. No obstante, existen casos en que cada injerencia o intromisión no pueden considerarse legítimas en virtud de razones de interés público que imponen una limitación a los derechos individuales, como son los indicados en el artículo 8 de la ley. Por último, la ley fija en su artículo 9, de acuerdo con lo prevenido del artículo 53.2 de la Constitución, el cauce legal para la defensa frente a las injerencias o intromisiones legítimas y ilegítimas, así como las pretensiones que pueda deducir el perjudicado, responde a la indemnización de perjuicios. Se presume que estos existen en todo caso injerencias e intromisiones acreditadas y comprenderán no solo los perjuicios materiales, sino también los de las morales. Especial relevancia en este tipo de actos libres, tanto no se ha regulado el amparo judicial. Se considera la aplicación cerca de la ley de protección jurisdiccional de los derechos de la persona de 26 de diciembre de 1988, cuyo ámbito de protección queda incorporado los derechos al honor, a la intimidad personal y familiar y a la propia imagen por la disposición transitoria. To sum up everything that's been there, because I doubt anybody has actually understood, is basically Spanish law about personal information being distributed and the right to honor. And this is another article. With the proper links that correspond to it. Now we're going to back to the actual screenshots. Due to this, the partisan censoring of the sexual object does not become a juridical mitigating factor. Or was almost in use giving textual consent. The Penal Code, the Article 9.7.7 protects the sexual intimacy. A picture of a sexual object is an extension of the intimate privacy. To propagate it with the factor of humiliating somebody is a crime of privacy breach and revealing secrets. Or I should say actually in Spanish, el Código Penal artículo 19 7.7. Protege la intimidad sexual. Una forma de juguete sexual propicia una extensión de la privacidad íntima y funde la condición de humillación de todo descubrimiento y revelación de secretos. Disseminating private messages or sexual conversations are being spoken about, and also sharing those images is also a crime against personal information and intimacy. And also near East German, and in Germany, the law is equally stringent. This is the law that, but in Germany also punishes the dissemination of pictures and images that violate personal and private information of a victim. Also, the right, o el derecho a la propia imagen, so the right to your images, KUG. The publishing without consent is a crime that can be punished with prison time up to a year. Because the private messages are linked to a vibrator, and as the vibrator is linked to a specific person, and they're also distributed to damage the reputation and the dignity, it is possible under the law of sexual harassment and violation of privacy. Some of the guilty people reside in the United States, in which this is also juridically penalized. Most states have laws, penal code specific against revenge porn. Sharing intimate images without consent goes anywhere from any material that shows a person that's naked or involved in a sexual action. The dissemination of images of sex toys, if it looks for harassing or extortion, is illegal, independent of whether the culprit or whether the culprit has lucrative goals or not. The psychological damage and the lack of consent of the victim and that their vulnerability is exposed are the precedents. Going back to the document of the year, it's important to underscore no interest in debate in semantics of the Google Doc, and the Choco's answer and the experience of the victim were already underscored in the previous document. Year's documents, Choco's documents, the summer one and the current ones, the subjects that will be spoken about are the inconsistencies, the criminal liability, the double standards and lies, and also Year's crimes that were proven to be committed. Year from the start proposes two lies. First, having the objective and impartial truth. Year and Ezra were best friends. The document was contaminated for different reasons, pushing the victim to react of a visceral manner. This is documented by Nair has consequences, criminal ones. Pushing provoking intention the victim so they react, and also that they committed crime, is also known primarily as induction, instigation, and also provoking the committed crime. In this scenario, the person who provokes the instigator wasn't for another person, the victim, to execute a delictive action, usually with the objective of prejudicing, controlling, or to have them be put on a provoked crime. Merely speaking is about convincing or persuading the other person to commit a crime. even the instigator doesn't always partake into the final action, is criminally responsible because they exert the influence on the crime to be committed. Let's go back. Because I think that this got provoke instigation as a crime. The direct inciting to perpetrate a crime usually realizes public way or through messages that they look to generate a reaction. Situation in which a person commits a crime as a result of another person. It's not a completely free conduct, but generated artificially by another person who provokes them. They are falsifying a document about sexual harassment that doesn't exist. Kept from the vulnerability of the victim with mental regression and sexual trauma. Unused reactions as narrative is an aggravating factor of everything aforementioned. Could be part of a system or little cis-kid, which is stating communities, unlike communities, has autonomy that is reduced in regards to sexual content. To speak out about the what's before isn't using trauma as a weapon. Expression. Meaning that speaking about being a cis kid is not using trauma as a weapon, is being precise. Because it's not convenient to the offenders doesn't mean that it's a weapon. Because it's not for them to weaponize in the first place. Second thing is that Nier has lied about showing all the pictures without cropping them, especially. Nier projecting. Nier and connoisseurs are known for causing unelicited emotional responses of victims, and after using the lack of emotional empathy as a shield, same way and at the same time that they turned reactions of material. Nier relates the language of people since he was a kid, so the only way in which the narrative of Nier is kept is if you haven't read the documents. If you assume the words are facts without investigating. Same way as he denigrates the experiences of everybody else and then turns it into public ridicule. Or someone to be too ashamed or embarrassed to defend a victim. Nier's pieces of writing have a quality that unifies them. At a superficial level, that makes sense. The way in which words are constructed to push a narrative and invert the narrative fits in the same behavior that we have already established as personality. Provoking the victim, let the victim react, and document those reactions of the victim with his support group, using the proper words to describe the recipient as someone, the same way as someone who just narrates a documental about animals. However, any adult person with personal critical thinking skills can deduct in a very easy manner that 80% of what Nair preaches is a lie, omission, and the 20% is the cause of that omission. His whole document exemplifies it. El delito de denuncia falsa, ocultación de contexto, ocurre cuando alguien interpone una denuncia pero omite intencionalmente hechos fundamentales que cambiarían el sentido de la acusación, haciendo pensar culpable a quien no lo es. El Código Penal sanciona a quien, con conocimiento de su falsedad o que medio despreciación de la verdad, imputa a alguna persona hechos delictivos. Basically meaning libel, but using omission. Omitir el contexto es clave. No se trata solo de inventar una historia, sino de manipularla. Omitting the context is key. It's not just someone making up a story, but manipulating it. In the full context, self-defense, consent, falsity of the accusation is omitted in order for someone to judge erroneously that this crime is committed. Prison of 6 months and 2 years and a fine. False testimony by omission. The person accuses omitting the context during a juridical declaration, such as a testimony, they're also committing false testimony. False testimony isn't just about affirming a lie, it's also denying the truth or the silence of the truth necessary for the facts to be taken and accounted for. This crime goes against the personal and the well-functioning of the justice administrations. Lear knows how to use words in a convincing manner and uses them to satisfy his convenience. And after accuses victims of the tactic that Lear uses. It's not a race. Saying the proper words before somebody says those doesn't make them true. Choco's color being the blue that isn't also relevant is used as an identity. Some authors in the system use different and associate different colors when they write. This is irrelevant, and however Lear omits it because even though it's already been expressed, the truth doesn't really serve him. Spot is repeated through the document. And in Lear is a person that's more relevant. Should is an action. Lear cannot demonstrate anything and cannot demonstrate that the answer to the sexual harassment that Choco gave was to jack off or to get off. It's really common to have destructive feelings on a crisis. And that Choco wanted to get and retaliate against what was done to them is an evidence that Choco did it. Another big factor is that there's no date and that there's not a timestamp that actually puts the messages into line. Intent is crucial about sexual harassment. Lear tries to manipulate another section in which Choco said that being sexually harassed and assuming that the reader would then come to the conclusion that there was no sexual harassment, since the intent wasn't, according to Lear, malicious. Otherwise, the intent was malicious. Manipulation tactic of Lear is twofold. First, that the reader assumes automatically that patronizing intention was benign, and that thus it discredits Choco, and that in lieu of the false assumption that it would be concluded the same way that Choco wasn't sexually harassed. Lear also believes himself to have the right to decide who is a victim and who isn't, according not to the facts, but his convenience. The second picture shows Choco having a grudge with patronizing, establishing that no, patronizing suffering doesn't really give him the right to cause suffering to others for fun or indifference. Near then brags about Choco being the victim number one in order to discredit them more. Going back to the same omission, false narrative, and a filigree lie. Here, must remind people, establish in this document that he will show all the context. The document of mine was subjective and his wasn't. That she changed all the context according to convenience. Projection. Because this is exactly what Nier does, as we said before. The full post was an answer to patronizing, saying that all their drama matter, and then Choco flipped the game and flipped the coin. Adding also that there he could do the same exact thing, or they could do the same exact thing as a form of irony. Nier knew this. It was like he cut up the post and didn't send a link to the original. That back then was the same as the blog. Was still available. Here we have perfect demonstration of that one. The reason is simple. Nier's logic only works if we ignore the fact, the lack of the timestamps and the omission, and we take his words at face value without contrasting information. Tennyson Secretary Harris calculated 10 of June cemetery document after. Was losing yours Secretary Harris Choco after consenting to a picture being shown. Independently of what it was distributed to a third party without consenting, and in doing I hypersexually attack caused by patronizing. Ezra accusing a Choco publicly of forced sexual conversion, which only was fixed 2 months after, when the hammocks and the harm was already done. And a lot later, of admitting to having access of NSFW of Choco, aka the Autistic Dolly account, into his followers, above being minors. 4 cases of sexual harassment perpetrated, amplified, and distributed by a coordinated net of harassment. Truth doesn't need it for you to change the context. Nier shakes it from the start and started his document from a false premise. Choco blamed Nier and the rest of what they were doing, and everyone denied it. They blamed Choco. So I started. Look, sexual harassment, we didn't do this. We just wanted to evade consequences. Consequences aren't for the victims, they're for the perpetrators. An eloquent narrative built upon a lie is an admission of guilt, and Nair is guilty. Another important factor to underscore is the gaslighting, the exchange gaslighting with the Gish-Galo fallacy. Word vomiting arguments without substance, while also using as a focal point the amount of noise in order to cause fatigue, when neither argument really held anything together. And also neither argument was held in accordance to reality. Thousands of people were involved at Nair and his cult. The defamation of sexual conversion was propagated by hundreds of people, each one with his net of people that he knew, and a lot also planning behind servers and behind Discord servers, still created to accost and instigate Choco. The information is easy to find reading the documents. Secondly, Near's emotional manipulation, alleging that Choco's harassers weren't harassers. They were just people who were exposing his actions. This also underscores that Potter called that an near thought responsible and making responsible the victim of the actions of the harassers and the offenders after participating in the campaign of sexual harassment, built onto a false premise with premeditated intent. The victim had the work and the emotional labor to constantly fight back against the guilty people is a recurring tactic. And he also manages to make most victims bend. The role of accountability lies on those who spend months committing crimes against an adult, a vulnerable adult, based on lies, omission, and falsification, and also using the trauma of the victim as a talking point, a focal point, and then making friendship about somebody suffering, which is very common in predators. We never try to pervert Choco's trauma. We don't give a shit about Choco's trauma. Sorry, mistake. Your choice to pervert trauma of some other people is not subject to your degree. It's also not about how much you care or don't care about someone. Facts are what they are, and they speak for themselves. And you cannot manipulate the content. Well, what show was necessary to show Choco's behavior incorrect? It wasn't necessary to commit crimes or to lie about how a victim behaves in response to sexual harassment and change. And then lying constantly falsifying cinematic evidence and omitting 90% of the information was not necessary. It was a choice with consequences that are potentially legal. There is no one to point at the behavior of others, neither juridically nor morally. Neither is a judge, a victim, or even someone with principles. Is an abuser that adheres to whatever there's more noise and benefits in order to feel strong and mighty at the expense of people that are vulnerable, in order to soothe his boredom. Doesn't matter if they were private messages, your opinion is not relevant or consistent with law. The actions, the private years, the sexuals, and with a vulnerable victim being exposed as an aggravation, being exposed to harassment is an aggravating factor. The minors that were involved by near and the others are another aggravating factor. Evidence isn't just messages or screenshots. There's something to show that someone did something. It's important to be transparent and have evidence. We did that. We showed all the screenshots. We agreed with some feelings and also made others clear without caring about. It's important to have the real context of things, not just a perception. No. The evidence is that showed was someone did. The evidence that showed that someone did something needs the full story, without falsification or omitting information. The evidence doesn't get constructed or manipulated in order to change the context, just to make the victim the abuser. And the falsified information that was documented is a crime. He exposed himself by saying that he's an objective party, while he has a conflict of interest, and his best friends with another of the guilty people. Also, has she lied about showing the full information on meeting everything that exposed his false testimony and could have been receipts without the corresponding links that would incriminate them, as was already demonstrated. Here's Christ's rage bait, and Choco's a rage baiter. After Choco pointed at him and his friends were being repeated offenders of provocations, hosting ones, only document the response of Choco in the course of the campaign of sexual harassment that Choco lived. Projecting is a defense. To invert the truth is not a defense. And the no use, not an argument, neither logical nor juridical one. More crop screenshots. Choco posted about his drama first that a victim talks about their experiences on a safe space does not give you permission in order to appropriate them. This is precisely the conduct of predators that Choco has already underscored. The initiative to speak about the trauma of others as if they were theirs and for theirs to decide about, and they have to try authority over those experiences. Even though Choco already had users blocked, now I use the block evasion as an excuse. Considering Nier was also block evading. I'm block evaded first. Choco is a creator, writer, and an amateur, and understands concepts of a deep, profound, instinctive level. The capability to read and write. In fact, when it comes to literacy, Choco has no issues with it. In fact, process information at a speed that Nier cannot really match in a natural manner, considering Nier's writing is artificial. Nier is condescending. From beginning to end, his text is written with fallacies, omission, fabricated evidence, crop screenshots, and also thinly veiled invective. This is very, very complex that is really easy to see portrayed. Also, his information is really well-founded when it comes to objectivity. While Choco's document formulates the situation from beginning to end, sharing the actual screenshots and the timestamps with the continuity, nearly picks and chooses which screenshots he can find most convenient, manipulated in a sporadic manner, what correction he received, and then added subtext that conditions the reader to trust his word and not what was actually showed, like Choco when Nier tried to turn correction into an attack. Choco underwent a crisis in the midst of a campaign of sexual harassment produced by a large amount of people, which actually people who actually hit the same point, the nervous system, the nervous center system. And Choco even then was sufficiently awake and lucid to dismantle Nier's document and show the truth from its origin. Cherry-picking the false narratives, the croppings, and the disinformation used using language that they don't understand is exactly a problem for Nier and his document. Part of, aside from being pretentious, is also written from an incorrect premise, from omission, through screenshots, and lying about context that Nier is a convenience with, as opposed to the actual context that we showed. Nier picks and chooses what context is convenient to him. Nier, as I recall, were corrected on a reiterative manner on all his points. While Nier alleges that Choco doesn't use words the proper way, his argument hinges on twisting the definition of said words to add whatever meaning Nier believes is convenient in accordance to the situation, subtracting the context that was provided in order to reintroduce a false and new definition of the word according to the context that Nier Prince himself prefers, showing a total lack of reading comprehension. As was already showcased, most screenshots having crop years already been dismissed previously at a greater scale at all his points. However, with the summer document, Choco, near Nair or concerts could really dismantle everything. The full truth is always going to weigh more than lies with a good writing and with a mission. He exposes his pseudo-intelligence like something that is assumed. But he really comes lacking when it comes to actual evidence and objective data, falsifies evidence on each screenshot, and they don't miss. From every screenshot of something, he falsifies two that correct him and that shows the actual facts. I should expose everything with continuity, near instead of nodding and rectifying, trusted that words that were well formulated will weigh more than the content itself. Projection comes into play with the evidence, false narratives, and the superiority complex. Here's a person of which has got complex and also thinking himself better than others is exemplified from start to finish the document. He also speaks in another segment about the Dunning-Kruger effect. All of this quality is actually applied to Nier, and as well as concerts. Here's an example, a perfect example of the Dunning-Kruger effect. He has no knowledge about mental health, the law or theory of mind. All he does is parrot what he's told by other people and substitutes knowledge for repetition. A very clear thing is when he made a comment about the MAP acronym and stated it came from the Multiple Animation Project on YouTube, which is this information. Nier has a defect, degrading with the most confidence information that is easily disproven. In the context, Choco was speaking about map hunting using a terminology that was textually relevant to the app, because it was inferring to the terminology specifically tailored to Tumblr. The claim that using the term is stigmatizing is nothing but a fallacy. The same thing happens when it comes to mental health speak. Nier says with the sentence, "You're more than your trauma," has positive connotations, and dispatching it and dismissing it is arguing with professionals. Of course, Nier knows that this is bullshit because Nier's own words have always said that positivity and that there's nothing to be positive about. So this is just empty contrarianism. You're more than your trauma is something that Nier himself finds preachy. But because he was being a contrarian, he wanted to argue a point that directly contradicts his supposed ethics. However, the harm from using those words are clear. Nier makes the same exact fallacies throughout the entire piece of writing. Tries to discredit information based on his opinions, information that is proven incorrect, or a narrative that just doesn't hold itself together. Tronizing was the user that Nier had covered up for. Sure, people can have problems with the same person. That's partially true. The context is omission. Cause and effect make clear that when you start a campaign against someone that has a chain reaction. Choco wasn't sent hate mail for unspecified causes. Choco was sent hate mail in conjunction to the campaign that was started by Nier and concerts. Screenshots show Choco decreeing that any minor interacting with a post that had content with a content label would be blocked. A logical sentiment. Nier answers with an anecdote that doesn't really hold itself with any truth. And the only times that minors knew about Choco's blog, the other one, or precisely because Freud exposed that block. Curious that the private information is simulated several times. Just like in the second part of the message where Nier omits the screenshot that shows the full receipt. The document that Nier, no matter how well written it is, would immediately be disregarded by a court of law. Not just because it's compromised, it will also for the amount of croppings and the omission. Omission being used as a weapon is a perjury charge. Nier hasn't shown any anonymous message, just that Choco admitted to sending that text. Anon asking is an assumption that the same exact document dismisses. Choco stating that male and AMAB survivors have less visibilization of sexism, underpinning difficulties that a particular group of people face on a determined circumstance does not describe the other group. Here's, again, pushing a false dilemma. Near documenting someone's rant on someone's been posting on the crisis caused by him and the others and utilized it as a moral indictment. Something that he does fill the document. Choco cannot know what someone thinks. Cannot know what people feel, just like Nier cannot know what Choco or other people feel. That Google is free does not dismiss information. Choco isn't stigmatizing anybody or making people see male survivors as rapists just by underscoring a societal problem with victim blaming and with pointing out also that people who are AMAB are usually seen as creepier, usually prone to be listened less when it comes to matters of being a survivor. Nobody's mind is to be read, knowing the social situations going on and knowing the status quo is enough. There is nobody to opine about whether someone can learn from whom and why. There is even less skill and even less apt to opine about who and whether someone can or cannot know somebody's intentions. Intent is not an opinion. It's the relationship between words and the actions that follow. Nier's intentions were premeditated. Nier told the readers that it's pointless to believe the words of a Tumblr user. Nier is a Tumblr user. Yes, it is ad hominem, without arguing, without it mattering how much it hurts Nier. It's just said that being annoying does not make it true what somebody said, but calling someone annoying without really saying anything about the argument or addressing the argument is in fact ad hominem, because it's attacking the perceived conduct, not the argument. Nier uses a crisis as a point, as a focal point. That's something that Choco didn't start. And then saying that a crisis is, again, because of erratic behavior, pushing a narrative of harassment despite and after harassing Choco. You gotta hold that a victim has committed the crime of a torture crime, like sexual conversion, and then say that it was a typo. And after the victim was harassed twice at the recent time, right amongst the same exact week as the accusation, just because it was launched and just before it was launched when the campaign started, and then tag the reactions that you provoke as harassment. Another pattern of conduct. holding Choco or making Choco accountable for the harassment that Nia perpetrated, and then alleging that Choco had to start to accept the false premise and also to leave his own situation or their own situation, and also making Choco responsible for Nia's actions and the rest, alleging that Choco wasn't sorry or Choco had apologized. And then when Choco did apologize, without even understanding what was being said or done, because context had not been provided, Nia then went and said to Choco didn't apologize. And then Choco did make the document to defend themselves and hold people accountable. Nia enjoys the hurt that he causes people. It doesn't give him any pleasure. It simply distracts him from being bored. It's something that Nia has confessed on his own blog. Nia admitting that she took the screenshots out of context. After saying that all the evidence was full and without cropping, both things which were demonstrated to be true. Both him and the screenshots that he took being taken out of context, being demonstrated to be true. And then it being a lie that the receipts and that all the information that Nia had documented was objective and without cropping. Exposing the truth means providing the full information. The fact of cropping on a repeated manner screenshots to push a narrative that was demonstrated as false only accentuates at a better way the contents of harassment that Choco had lived. Private DMs of Choco were distributed without his consent after being sexually harassed by patronizing. The person with Choco conversed did consent textually. Nia posted images of her three documents. Then took it back when the other person asked for it. However, taking out the evidence of the crime is not a mitigating factor. Nia cannot argue with a primary source, the same exact source that dismissed him. Nia's wrong. Like, clock say shit for everybody doesn't mean that it can be worse for a selected group of people in specific circumstances. And also, and that clock say shit for everybody in the MAV people are making who are believed less are not mutually exclusive. The success content actually being provided by Nia. Equity being dodged due to discomfort and personal discomfort in order to feed equality is sexist. Men can be more prone to be more vulnerable in some aspects, and women can be more vulnerable in others. It is oversimplifying enormously an objective fact and extrapolating a false narrative in order to have something to protest about. As Nair was already corrected beforehand, pointing at a situation that an alpha group does not invalidate the other group by default. And for someone who critiques about nuance and complex topics, Mia has severe issues understanding tonality and nuance. Learn something is not an educational format, just because it has the word learn. Ironically, Near said that something is not sexual harassment because Choco said that patronizing harassed him. The commentary of Near was just because the sentence says the word tick doesn't turn it into sexual harassment. The key difference is that Choco didn't leak sexual harassment because of that. Choco leaked sexual harassment because of the crying about religion will make you unmolested. Which, with the person knowing that Choco was raped as an infant as a baby by religion, targeting that specific part, and saying that it wouldn't get them unmolested is sexual harassment. Sexual harassment. Well, sexual harassment doesn't need to be legally sexual harassment. But the legal definition is not the only one that matters. Sexual harassment is sexual conduct that is inappropriate, targeted at a person that did not consent to it. That crying about religion won't make you unmolested is true. Doesn't take away from the fact that saying that to someone who was raped as a baby by Christianity is sexual harassment. You really don't need to distinguish harassment from coercion. Both are things that Mir and his school have perpetrated, demonstrated by the documents already presented, including yours. In Choco's document, the screenshots showed pseudonyms and monikers of people with a username and a derivative. These things happen on some in the same campaign. It's not enough that Choco made a close call of Parushi-Frago in accordance and in consequence of sexual harassment and of the instead of a W account of Choco being distributed without consent, without being a public account. While through a server, there were accounts like this. Taken from Choco's own document. Pointing out two more relevant indications of the crimes that Nier thinks that he knows. Before that, though, let's pause for a bit. Because Frog was projecting being known for being horrible liars, which Nier, Frog, and his concerns got called out for many, many times. While the only source that they ever have for someone quote-unquote lying is either taken out of context sentences or simply, this is what I don't like, and so I will repeat it until this can gaslight people. But as we can see with this document, neither Ezra's or Frog's bullshit, or Great Candice or anybody else does matter. Because they have been live for over 8 months now. Doxing. Nier and Frogo tried to look for private information about Choco, including the biological name of the body. The detail was deleted by an associate named Ace. Choco have information about Ezra, and Ezra suspected by themselves, and this was and is still publicly available information, aka Throbo's main blog. Sexual harassment is a form of digital harassment. Extortion is an act of blackmailing the other person sharing intimate material unless a particular amount of money is provided. The line between sexual harassment and digital harassment is blurry. Not only is that exactly what Nier and Cultures did, but as pointed out here, there's also Wikipedia's particularly insidious. You can associate an example that involves minors and try to emphasize and interlink and using Wikipedia to a campaign of sexual harassment that you perpetrated under different pretexts, and that the victim allegedly harassed adults. The subtext leaves room for the readers to interpret the citation, thinking that the citation is being referred to the case and not an example of the alleged offense itself. Nair sourcing that incriminates Nair under level, independently that it wasn't the accusation. The Penal Code 184 of the Spain is exclusive to work and also professional interactions. Nair sources articles that Nier doesn't know about. Nier has no juridical knowledge, neither the Spanish one, neither the one in the US, and apparently nor the one in Germany, exemplifying the very Dunning-Kruger effect of range. Sexual harassment, Nier is guilty, both in a colloquial and juridical sense. Harassment, Nier is guilty. Calumnia, which is defamation, aka libel in this case, is guilty. Sexual extortion, Nier is guilty. And by Nier is infinite-proship-choco and everyone else involved. Nier is guilty of all the aforementioned. And also the other perpetrators under the faction rate provided. Nier documenting and narrating someone's event amidst a campaign. By definition, none of the members already mentioned in the document are pro-ship. Caleb entered the blog of Choco in order to ask for help. The only alliance for beneficiation purposes was by patronizing Cemetery Dog and Nier and the rest. However, the fact that Nier projects a history about false narratives, while his full document was constructed layer after layer on the false narrative, says everything. No. Bringing up together a group of people to sexually harass somebody on repeated occasions, and then orchestrate a campaign in which federal crime was committed on Nier's part and his cult. Do not let him solicit that these consequences he is getting him exempted from them. Actual consequences and mere sentiment in response to that is irrelevant. You explain to the public that users are animals simulating being intelligent, while the mental masturbation of describing wars, everyday wars, as a pretext continues. No, taking advantage of somebody doesn't need an arbitrary recompense that Nair can neither deny or accept. Nair cannot know that, and also is not relevant. The objective fact, people with power over somebody else, on some very vulnerable person was being exercised, which therefore counts as taking advantage. First, neither cannot dictate the amount of time the time someone was being preyed on or preyed upon was reduced, and was a small amount of times, and thus the anguish was not constant. A fact can leave a mark, a lifelong mark, and the campaign that has been campaign against Choco lasted 4 months, so it was in fact constant. Indirect oppositions to the time that neither and others got responded, which was a minute thing, and yet all of them chose to play victim. Secondly, under that premise, his own document would dismiss itself, even if we ignore the reality of the events and we took the false reality that neither writes. Choco responded to everything that Nier and his friends did. The answer being crop. The answer being cut short on the duration. Bragging and reciting words and playing with the context, doing theater, is a distraction that might work on adolescents, but it doesn't work on adults. Neither needs to send in an anonymous message with a clear intent to provoke. The intention had been to obtain information. The anonymous wouldn't have been the method that I would have used. That the intention was to steer the pot. And it also to add fuel to the flame, which is objective, according to the method in which the question has been formulated, dishonest, and also looking for an emotional response. Redundant hypocrisy. Near preaches that band evading is an ethic, however, that's exactly what he got caught doing. And the image contradicts exactly what Near tries to allege, saying that whoever likes the post with a content label, whoever minor likes the post with a content label will be blocked. And thus, that the interaction is not wanted. And yet Nier, with the prodigious literary skills that he has, goes on to explain exactly the opposite of what's shown on the screen. No, Choco was harassed by patronizing cemetery dog. There is follow-up when distribution messages were in distribution, prior message was being distributed using the sex toy as a sort of revenge porn for something that the person had consented to see, fully knowing that the victim had reduced autonomy in the situation, and then trying for said victim not to react to the sexual information that Froga leaks about conversion and forced conversion. After it was asked that whether or not they were alive. Near united to document the same way at the same time that the Froga's information got spread out. And the erratic behavior was exacerbated by every person that fed onto the reactions. Near's projection about enjoying every second of the reactions, the rage, the impotence, the helplessness, and the situation in which were suffered this much by Choco. A singular that had us Choco sexually for months, bonding over the misery they spread onto a victim. What really understates and really shows The people guilty spend every day of their counting hacia victim. Questions were the following testimonies. The campaign that with an apology, mixed apology between Frogo, Choco, Nier, and the rest. And Choco used the body's legal name. Horse was in the front, but Choco used it regardless. A truth and what Nier wishes to be truth are different things. We already explained this. The server account to harass Choco existed and was used on a daily basis. People who pronounce themselves in respect weren't patronizing cemetery dog. It was constant or was I lost in use. The last person on the list entered the server before anybody else. Ver la paja del ojo ajeno y no la viga del propio. Which is another ways to say rules for thee but not for me. Nier is entiendo. So both already committed crime and now both are also ableist. Aside from being, of course, incredibly disgusting people. There's no tribalism that exonerates the crimes that Nier has committed on a premeditated manner. To pronounce some while ago about the topic. Now that precedent has been extracted and the crimes that Nier have been officialized. Nier had an episode as if after using the vulnerable portion as a project response in a crisis in which Nier held a false narrative with documented crimes and recurring lies were demonstrated, and then Nier has the nerve, the shamelessness to play victim just because someone laughs at him for 5 minutes. After what we have seen and we have all read in the document, we don't think and see it necessary to explain why such a cognitive dissonance is a clownery that doesn't really deserve anybody's attention. Same way as Nier doesn't deserve anybody's respect as a person. Nier begged for evidence of his criminal culpability and his crimes that he committed. Now he has them. And this is the entire conversation that Frogo and I had since the quote-unquote end of the summer situation. There's a big list, so I'm not gonna really pause it. Whoever wants to read can. I'm just gonna scroll. Oh, I will pause though, because that way I can also show that Caleb did, in fact, come into my inbox, not the other way around. And this was me basically helping people get throwback followers when it wasn't dessert, and when they really didn't do anything for me to do that, to what they did. Incredibile ironic, huh? You deserve a break, Choco. You've done so much for the pro-ship community. Yeah, and what has the community done for me? Exactly. Nothing. Honestly, I could have gone all the way down to all the messages, but that would take hours. Needless to say, there are many messages here between us, Fro and I, the past months. Fact of the matter is, I held them through all the crises they had. I dealt solo with the Caleb situation alongside the radical anti-shipper situation. The platform, two of the biggest people that Frogo and consorts were most against, which were officially Shadow Wolf memes and Sile the Anthi. And well, all of that right after the summer crisis, they had the audacity to do the thing with the Myanmar situation and use me not only to regulate their emotions for events on my own blogs when I had much bigger ones, and then also to chase clout from my blog, because yes, that's exactly what they did. Using me as a trauma dump with no feelings, whose voice on their own situation tries to get spoken over, and then when boundaries get enforced and someone actually snaps, then they crash out. And that's just a glimmer of the entire conversation with them. But yeah, needless to say, I don't think Frogo spent over 5 months bending and using help from a quote-unquote liar. What Frogo does, however, is lie constantly. He lied about not being part of the Myanmar situation and the thing they found there with the behind the servers. Lied about not running the second campaign with Rick Candy, and also repeated the same lies with the lights and the strokes and shit. Nobody in the whole thing with the strokes got hurt, and that wasn't an accident. That was myself. Because nobody got hurt, but they needed to pout and they needed to try to deflect what they did. They tried to use possible harm as a deflection for their actionable harm. And the strokes and the thing with the epileptic thing, no other epileptic persons. Other people were targeted, no matter how much they would like it to be. Meanwhile, this was the summer, narrated and shown with my own side in summer. Also a preview of the Mirmo one. Mind you, I was in a crisis and I was still able to document all of this by myself. And mind you, since people wanted to defend Caleb so badly now, let's remember that Caleb was already a thing back in February, way before I got involved. So that's for those who wanted to lie. I wanted to try and pretend that Caleb was a minor who did nothing wrong and someone harassed. No. Caleb started their own harassment campaign in February and then continued it back in summer. And then you'll start your own. You'll, as in the perpetrators, who are going to be seeing this because they cannot help themselves. For all of us who say, oh, punching down on a 14-year-old, punching down a 14-year-old, yes, that's exactly what you did. Since February. A lot of people involved, older than myself biologically as well, by the way. So, yeah. Don't think that needs any more saying.
This